Hey everybody, this is Perch, or Dr. Perchington, as the people trying to extort me for money, would have you believe. Anyway, we got this mail. It says, "Hello once again, Dr. Perchington. Thanks for asking one of my recent questions about comic store protocol." Absolutely. I want to ask another question regards to the perception of comics by the greater public. Sure, why not? Simply put, I believe a sizable chunk of the public views comics purely as a novelty collector's item and not as a mass market item. You are correct. Something that, despite the publishers saying they want the opposite, they continue to steer into. And this is important because when you think about a lot of the actions that the publishers take, they often take actions that directly encourage the view of comics as a novelty item. And I'm glad you used that word because novelty item entails not mass market, not collector, but niche, however you want to say it. It is funny because I say niche, and people are like, that's completely an insane way to say it. And it's like, well, it depends on what part of the country you're from. Niche, niche, it's all about where you're from. It's kind of like nuclear. Anyway, you could tell a lot about where somebody was raised. And if you listen to me a lot, you'll notice I pronounce things very weird a lot of the time. A lot of that has to be with living in so many different places for long periods of time. And I'm a sponge. If I go to Japan, I get broken English like within 2 weeks. It's weird. I don't know why. It's not intentional. But I'll lose the ability to say the letter L. Like it's weird. I don't know why. It's just like I'm on a sponge. And so all of these things kind of combine to make a very, very strange way of talking. Which is either charming or super annoying, depending on your point of view. But anyway, back to the mail. It says, I say this, talking about how it's a collector's item and not a mass market item. I say this in part due to a recent experience taking my father to the local comic book shop for the first time. Upon seeing the comics, one of his first questions to me was whether I thought X comic would be worth something in the future. It surprised me a bit until I remembered that I'm probably in the vast minority of people that actually buys comics, let alone buys them to actually read them. This is a powerful statement that was just made, and I'm sure it hits home with a lot of you, but let's keep going. So this leads me to ask, do you think that this perception of comics being a collector's item is one held by the non-comic buying public? If so, how big an issue is it? What can be done to change this view of comics? I believe that lowering the amount of variant covers could be a start, but other than that, I don't have much of an idea. So I'm thinking that whatever can be done to change this perception, it may take years to take effect. Curious to hear your thoughts. Absolutely, it's going to take years to take effect. That is true. You can't change a big kind of psychology, public perception easily, but I hope that every comic creator who's listened to this, and at this point, quite a few comic creators listen to this channel. People who are active full-time employees, people who are, freelancers, etc. I have an audience that is comprised of a lot of people who are doing comics. And a few of them post publicly. You see their names. A lot of them listen and send mails. But this show, for whatever reason, this has become the show where a lot of people within comics listen to it, don't, usually or often agree with things that are being said. But it's like this become the show that is the kind of a weird litmus test on how things are going in the industry. I want all of you to hear this part. Comic books, by the mass market, by the general kind of zeitgeist, the consensus of the public, are considered a novelty item. They're considered a collector's item. They're kind of like it's like trading cards are now. It's not at the level of Pokemon cards, which we used to play a game is kind of fun, but it's more like people who go to collect sports cards. Sports fans often do not collect sports cards, which is one reason why, people who are fans of comic book movies often don't collect comic books. They've detached those things in their mind. And this is a problem. I mean, this is a distinct and unique kind of issue that comics has, is that the idea of buying and collecting and reading comics is foreign. Who reads comics anymore? In many cases, you've seen a lot of TV shows and movies and other things kind of, basically talk about the importance of mint condition and graded comics and all of this stuff that kind of gives you the idea that when you buy these things, you're not supposed to ever open it. You're supposed to immediately put it in plastic and seal it away and keep it in perfect condition. And I argue this is incredibly unhelpful to comics. Comics was not meant to be this. And so while a lot of us talk about the content inside the comics, is it, is it this, is it that, is it for a younger audience, older audience, a liberal audience, so what all that kind of stuff, that's not actually the core crux of the problem. The problem is that people view comics as a don't read at all medium. Now let that settle in for a minute. What's basically being said there is that comic books are in effect things that you're not meant to read. Is that true? Do you like that? I hate that. I'm a retailer. I hate it. In my mind, comics are meant to be read. But think for a moment, like how much of the messaging and the conversation around comics is, how much is it worth someday? Like what the writer, the person who wrote the letter in, that their father said. Can you, if you read this, is it less valuable? Are these the right questions to ask? Well, they are the questions being asked, but they're bad questions. It basically means that people are viewing these things not as entertainment, not as something to read, but as something to collect. And when something to collect, it means the reading is secondary. And if the reading becomes secondary, then, are we surprised that the content has struggled? I mean, kind of in that mentality, does it really matter if you've got a comic book written by Steve Orlando? I mean, granted, that comic book is going to suck. Steve Orlando is my Arby's. I'm picking on poor Steve Orlando. What's going to be really shitty about this is I've really started to poke at Steve Orlando. We're going to meet him. I've met him before, but I'm going to meet him again at a show. And he's like, "You asshole, you've been calling me out for the last like 2 years." And he's, Steve Orlando is actually a nice guy by and large. I mean, I don't know. I don't know him well. Like I said, I met him. But I don't hear a lot of people talk about how Steve Orlando's a prick. Not like people talk about like Kelly Thompson, for example. Like nobody likes Kelly Thompson, but in the industry, I mean. But like most people say, Steve Orlando's a nice guy. So I feel kind of bad about picking on somebody who's a nice guy. I don't like his writing. It's no offense personally. I think he's beautiful. I just don't. His writing, it's not for me. Nothing against him. I want him to do well. I want him to make money. I want somehow it's turned into a video about Steve Orlando. I want that guy to do well, and I want him to have a good life and everything else. I just can't stand his writing. That's where I'm at. So anyway, it's a weird thing to say. It's an honest thing to say, though, right? I mean, this is my honest viewpoint. It's tough. Okay. Regardless of all this, if comic books are meant to be a collector's item, something you put in a bag, something you grade, something you protect, and all the rest, then it stands to reason that whether it's a good comic or not, whether it's a good story or not, whether the art inside is good or not, is wholly irrelevant. Doesn't matter. You're not buying this comic book for the story. You're buying it as a collector, which means you're going to care about the condition it's in, the grade of the comic. You're going to care about the variant cover of it. You're going to care about a lot of things that don't matter. And overall, to the point, the person who wrote the mail, that's bad. That's creating a bad situation in comics. Comic books can't survive if they're viewed only as a niche novelty collector's item. They survive at a very minuscule, insignificant, pointless level. They need to be read. Read is what makes the magic happen. But what about you? What do you think? So I've laid out some thoughts. Think about it. Let me know in the comments below. I think comics as a collector's item, as a novelty item, is a trap. And I think it's one that, comic books, the publishers, the people who are in charge of it, needs to struggle against. They need to work to fix it. Living in that scenario, living in that world is dangerous and it's bad. and it needs to recover. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments below. Like and subscribe, of course, and thanks for listening.